The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Del Mar TV Foundation or the City of Del Mar.
Del Mar Hot Topics, where we discuss issues that are important to you. And now your host, Richard Levesque.
The bluffs of Del Mar are provoking discussions involving double tracking the Los Angeles-San Diego corridor. If you're interested in possible solutions and potential problems, stay tuned to Hot Topics. I'm Richard Levesque, your host.
Freight and passenger train service between Los Angeles and San Diego has increased. Double tracking appears the obvious solution, but the fragile bluffs in Del Mar cannot support a second track. Proposals include relocating the train to the I-5 corridor or tunneling under the main street. Del Mar City Council and the Rail Transportation Advisory Committee favor the I-5 relocation despite its significant engineering, environmental, and fiscal challenges. Local residents, though, oppose a tunnel running from lagoon to lagoon, 120 feet under the main street. They fear vibration, sinkholes, lost business revenue, property damage, and litigation. Del Mar streets will suffer under construction traffic, and how will local lagoons be affected? Is a tunnel in a sandstone base safe during an earthquake? Experts have given the seismic safety nod if construction is done properly. The town is in a small quiet zone where earthquakes are rare. Still at the environmental review stage, this complex problem will be expensive to solve. But questions remain. Should the tracks be moved? If so, where? And what public transport alternatives would work?
I'm Richard Levesque, and you're watching Hot Topics. With me today are David Drucker, City Council member, two members from the Railway Transport Advisory Committee, Lou Lipton and Jim Ekman, and longtime Del Mar resident John Kerridge. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we can start by asking you a little history. John, you were on the original Railway Advisory Committee. What was the purpose and what happened?
Well, the purpose of the committee was to investigate all aspects in which the Del Mar interacted with the railroad. This double tracking proposal was simply one of a number of issues that came before us, but of course it was by far and away the biggest, and that's how we basically got started.
And so what happened?
Well, we spent a lot of time, many meetings, discussing the various ramifications of double tracking, in particular the need to realign the tracks away from the bluff, and if the tracks were realigned away from the bluff, then where would they go, and how would that be organized? So we spent many meetings discussing that until eventually the committee became dysfunctional for various reasons.
Wow. So, Jim, yes. What's the present committee doing, and is it dysfunctional?
Not yet. We are exploring under an ordinance that the City Council gave us, the City Council's desire to explore the idea of moving the rails off the bluffs. I was on the original one with John in 2002, and we became dysfunctional over a specific issue about trying to get documents from the state as to what their plans were and what their studies were. And that was a 3-2 vote, and there were some resignations after that. The majority resigned, ironically, and the two that wanted to get more aggressive stayed on. The City Council then created this new agency about a year later.
So what is your mission? What is the purpose of this advisory committee now, specifically, Lou?
Well, the mission is to try and implement the directive from the City Council, which is specifically to look at the possibilities of moving the tracks from the bluffs onto the I-5 corridor and freight further inland.
So you've been asked by the City Council to find a way to effect that if it's possible.
Correct.
And so any addition there?
Well, basically, the council's position is that the trains need to be removed from the bluffs. I mean, that's the number one position. When people look at Del Mar, they look at the bluffs as a very important part of Del Mar in terms of the natural environment. And you'll have Crest Canyon, you've got San Diego Lagoon, you've got the North Beach area, and then you have the bluffs. And this is a very important part that remain natural. And so therefore, the council's taken the position, with, we believe, community support, that the trains must be removed from the bluff. The best spot for them, we believe, would be along the I-5 corridor.
And why do the train tracks need to be removed?
Two reasons. One is because we want to maintain the natural beauty. That's extremely important. And two, we want to preempt any concept of ever double tracking the bluff, and thus not allowing people maybe to access the beach and or access that natural environment, which is extremely important to most Del Martians.
So go on, John.
Well, it's important to add a couple of issues to that. One of them is that the presence of the track on the bluffs is basically an accident waiting to happen. We've already had one train wreck of the train going off the cliffs. Fortunately, it was just a freight, and only the two crew members were killed. But if it had been a passenger train, we'd have had fatalities in the hundreds, and this is simply unacceptable.
John, when did that happen?
1940.
1940, and that's like
1941.
roughly 65 years ago?
1941.
Almost exactly, yes.
Yeah, and so this is not a problem that's imminent. I mean, I assume things have been done to shore up the bluff since that time?
Well, only partly. That has indeed been done a little bit. More to the point, however, is that erosion has been taking place throughout that time as well, and probably erosion has been more efficient than the local government. So, to take a blasé attitude towards this situation, I think, is extremely irresponsible. In fact, I would say that anybody who argues, even implicitly, in favor of the status quo, is taking personal responsibility for any accident that happens
that's
there.
a heavy gun there, John. Now, you are now part of the advisory committee. What have you found? Is it vital for safety reasons? Let's take John's statement. Is it vital for safety reasons to move the train track?
Well, the City Council was wrestling with this similar issue back in September, and they would probably fall victim then to John's accusation because NCTD, North County Transit District, wanted to repair and support 2,400 feet of this 1.6-mile bluff. However,
Through Del Mar.
Through Del Mar. However, the city's consultant cut that figure to 700 feet, roughly by 2/3. So, if it's that dangerous, the City Council is treading on thin water as well.
Basically what the City Council was saying was right now the imminent danger is between 11th Street and like 13th, 14th Street. Ultimately, the North County Transit District and the other travel agencies that use that track will demand that the other portions be armed such that there is no possibility of the train falling off the bluff. There are spots down further where they could turn around and say, you know, this is dangerous. And ultimately, unfortunately, Del Mar has very little power over that because we don't have any power over the right-of-way. The right-of-way is totally owned by North County Transit District. They don't have to follow Coastal Commission rules because as long as it remains in the right-of-way, they can do what they need to do.
So what you're saying is that you are sure that the bluffs are going to need to be shored up. If you don't get the train tracks away, then Del Mar loses control over how that bluff is shored up.
Absolutely.
Is it, go on,
Yeah,
Lou.
well, there's a whole bunch of assumptions there. I mean, for example, if you look at some of the geological studies that have been done, it's clear there's erosion going on. It's a natural process, but it's not going on at a very rapid rate. And it's by no means clear that the whole bluff is going to fall down. We're acting as though this whole thing is going to fall down momentarily, and so we're going to lose all sorts of passengers. And that's obviously not true. Moreover, there has been mitigation undertaken by the NCTD, and they're paying for it to try and stabilize the bluffs in terms of removing water that is really the cause of the primary cause of the bluffs falling. So with the mitigation and with other activities that could be undertaken, it's not at all clear that the bluffs are going to fall into the sea immediately.
And I think John is overstating it, because obviously if it was that dangerous, then the rails would not even be able to operate right now, and they are.
No, we're confusing, I'm afraid we're confusing short-term and long-term issues here. I'm talking about a long-term threat. The mitigation efforts that NCTD has just recently done are very worthwhile, but they are aimed at a short-term measure. I'm talking, and that's fine.
What short term? A month? 6 months?
No, a few years,
Maybe 20 years.
Yes, up to 20 years. But in something like, I think the council actually specified something like a 20-year period, isn't it? That's
Right,
the
that's
time frame. That's the time frame on which we need to start talking, we need to be talking about removing the tracks. And the point about bringing it up now and making a major issue out of it now is not because the tracks are going to fall into the bluff next year, but because in 20 years, it takes 20 years to move several government departments far enough to get them to do anything. So that's the reason why we're doing it now. Well, nobody's saying, oh, you know, the sky is falling, trains are going to be falling into the ocean in a couple of years. That's not the point. The point is, if we don't start the ball rolling now, 20 years from now, there'll be people sitting around this table arguing the same thing and just waiting to hear.
Well, let me ask you a question, John. Let's assume that you're right, and let's assume that the bluffs are going to fall, and magically we get the trains off the bluff, okay? Are the bluffs still going to fall?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the bluffs will fall whether they have the trains or not. And therefore, the homeowners that have homes on the bluffs, they're going to be happy with this, and they're going to let their houses fall into the ocean.
The bottom line, though, is that Del Mar has a very strict ordinance that says you cannot build within 50 feet of the bluff. So everybody is back with at least 50 feet right now, and some of that is close. Some of that from the bluff that goes down to the ocean is a lot further. So basically, we have as a city taken the position that it is retreat, planned retreat. People that live on the bluff are taking their house in hand, shall we say, and if the bluff starts falling away, they are not allowed to build something that will stop the bluff from eroding.
Right, just as they weren't allowed to do it in Solana Beach or Leucadia, too, except that when it happened, what really happened is the pressure of the people
But in
on the
Leucadia
land.
and Solana Beach, the bottom line is they didn't have that type of policy. Right. We have a very strict policy that says you cannot arm the bluff anywhere in Del Mar, and there are bluffs all over Del Mar. There are bluffs in the Ocean View area.
So who will be responsible? Who is responsible for paying for the bluffs being shored up now?
Nobody can shore up the bluffs.
Well, the city, the railway did, right?
They put soldier piles, which are basically.
So they paid for that.
They pay for that.
If they move the railway line, who pays for shoring up the bluff?
We will not shore up the bluff.
So how do the homeowners feel on the bluff?
Then you're talking about a problem in a time frame of hundreds of years.
Number one, but number two, some of the homeowners understand that they have bought a piece of property that may eventually end up worthless, just like some people at the beach understand that they may have bought at some point a property that is worthless. And it is unfortunate, but you're taking a chance whenever you buy a piece of property. On the bluff especially, but this, as John said, is hundreds of years away. It isn't going to happen. Even in 20 years, the bluff will recede maybe 20 inches or 30 inches, but it's not going to recede to the...
So why are we working with a time clock that's 20 years if the area of recession, as it were, is so small? What are we worried about right now if we have hundreds of years, John?
Hundreds of years to get to the houses.
To get to the houses, but even with regard to the tracks, I mean, the way that this is presented is though, it's presented as though there's an imminent failure that's going to occur and we're going to lose people, which is not true. Secondly, it's presented insofar as we're going to leave the bluffs unchanged and we're going to just let these fall, and the homeowners who say they're going to be happy with this are going to be happy with it, which is patently untrue. But more importantly, there are ways to stabilize the bluffs.
Can we take a quick break?
Sure.
Can you hold your thoughts?
Sure.
And we'll be right back.
Okay.
You're watching Hot Topics. You can see there's a lot of feelings here. We'll be back in a moment. We'll see you in a second.
Learn more about rail relocation, Attend a meeting of the Rail Transportation Advisory Committee. Everyone's welcome when the committee meets at City Hall Annex at 5 p.m. on the last Tuesday of each month.
You're watching Hot Topics. With me today are David Drucker, Lou Lipton, Jim Ekman, and John Kerridge. Right before we had the break, you made a point.
Yes. The point I was making was that I find it hard to imagine that the homeowners on the bluffs are going to accept the notion of the bluffs disappearing and their homes with it, and that in fact we won't require some kind of shoring up on the bluffs at a later date. I also disagree significantly with the assumption, and it's purely an assumption, that if we have to shore up the bluffs, the only thing we can do is destroy them and do them in a very ugly way. It's patently untrue. But we don't even look at that. We don't raise that as an issue. We don't ask the question.
But two things. One is I've talked to people that do live on the bluff, and they agree with that position. And number two is the erosion on the bluff needs to be natural. And that's what the bluffs are about. Those are one of the, in the whole world, there are very few sandstone bluffs that are like the ones in Del Mar. There's only, actually in the United States, there's only one other spot that is like that, and that's in Virginia.
Okay. Well, look, John, did you have a quick thing to say?
I just
because
want to
we
say,
want to move.
again, Lou is confusing short-term and long-term problems. The rail tracks are close to the edge. They will go first. The houses are significantly further away. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're talking about a 20-year time frame for likely danger to the tracks, hundreds of years for possible danger on their to the homes. There are so many. The idea of planning for hundreds of years in the future in a community in Southern California is absurd.
But John, hundreds of years may not be the issue if the bluffs are not protected by the railways.
No,
it could go a lot quicker. It could be in some people's lifetimes. But
they're currently not protected in certain spots. I mean, there's no protection at all. All there is the bluff.
And historically, most of the things that the railroad have done have actually exacerbated erosion. These drainage devices that Lou was talking about earlier are one of the few exceptions where probably erosion is being diminished by railroad activity.
Okay, well, let's do this. Given that the city council wants the railway line moved, what are the options? What are the options? Tell me about the tunnel, John.
Can I, before we get into that, I just want to make what I think is a really overarching point about all this.
Yes.
And that is that this issue, as I hope is obvious, is one of the most important ones confronting our community right now. And I think it's absolutely essential that the community forms its opinion, makes its decisions on the basis of facts.
Okay,
right?
so tell us...
Because there are facts and we need to know them. We know some of them, a lot we don't know. But what we've got to get away from is the incredible amount of garbage that is being spoken and written about this issue, particularly about the tunnel. Virtually everything you read about the tunnel in the paper is untrue.
What is it you're talking about specifically about the tunnel that's untrue?
Disruption to the downtown business district.
You don't believe that?
Of course not. There's no reason at all to suppose that the business district will be affected.
Are you familiar with the LA experience at all?
LA is a totally different situation.
It's a tunnel,
John, let me finish,
in a commercial area.
There are differences. Right. The thing about LA is, and I've spent a lot of time in LA, and particularly used to commute along the Wilshire Corridor. Where would you start drilling a tunnel? It's flat, it goes on for tens of miles. How do you drill a tunnel? You can't. Here, it's perfectly simple. You drill from the ends because we've got basically, we're on a mesa, and to the north and the south, we have areas from which drilling can be conducted. There is no... This is exactly what has just been done at San Diego State.
Okay, so...
All right, they didn't miss a day's classes at San Diego State while they were drilling the trolley tunnel underneath, because
students are a different market than consumers. Students have to go to class. Consumers don't have to shop here. They don't have to go to offices here. They have choices.
Let's hear Lou. Go on. Let Lou say something.
John,
go on.
You know, you want to talk about facts. You know, the RTAC committee had an engineer, civil engineer in here last meeting.
Yes,
a guy who was involved.
Read about him and his
700 odd cases up in LA, and he did a quick calculation estimating that 141,000 trucks will have to come and go just to haul the dirt, and I don't think he included the concrete, as I recall.
No.
Just to haul the dirt from the tunnel. Now, 140,000. Big trucks, you don't think that'll have an impact? How many ways into and out of Del Mar do we have? In case my memory isn't good, we have like 3. You can get in from the north, the south, or from Del Mar Heights Road. we're going to stop the traffic in
Explain
here.
to me why these
Okay, let
trucks...
John answer. Go on, John.
Well, explain to me why these trucks need to go into Del Mar.
They need to get the.
They just need access to the drilling site.
But they're on the same roads that people who are trying to get to Del Mar are on, John. We can't have conflicting uses like that. Plus, what would we do at the north end of town? These tunnels are 33 feet in diameter. That's inside diameter. Then there's concrete around them. We need about 50 feet of freeboard, 50 feet total. We don't have that at the north end of town. Jimmy Durante will not look at all like Jimmy Durante, nor will Ocean. We can't get into the tunnel without changing the alignment of those streets and the configuration of those streets. What about that part? There's no answer to that. There's no answer to that.
Well, let him answer. Go on, John.
Well, there is. There'd have to be some realignment of those roads. You're perfectly correct. And that would be a disruption, a local disruption. But there's no need for that to be the driver for the whole thing. The drilling can be done from the south end of town.
Is there another option?
Well, the other option really is to move the whole track to the freeway, and that's one of the things that we have been exploring. And our, we've asked RTAC to work with the other cities up the road, Solana Beach, Encinitas, Carlsbad, and see if there's some interest there for them also, because it goes through the middle of their towns, and especially in Encinitas, it bisects their town. It creates this divide between old Encinitas and new Encinitas that is sometimes very difficult for people to explore both sides of town, shall we say.
So what are the facts there?
I'd like to make the point that I'm not a protagonist for the tunnel. The tunnel, I think, just needs to be evaluated. That's what I was saying at the start. It needs to be evaluated on its merits, its true merits, not on this.
So you're not passionate about it. You're passionate about looking at the facts.
I'm passionate about the facts, and I'm passionate about moving the tracks. I'm in complete agreement with Dave about the desirability, if possible, of moving the alignment to coincide with the I-5 alignment. This is an extremely difficult problem. It is almost certainly a lot more expensive than drilling the tunnel. Just ask yourself this question. What do you do about Del Mar Heights Road?
What do you mean?
Well, imagine trying to impose a rail track on I-5.
And that's,
okay,
that's
go on.
Well,
and that's just one of the crossings.
Okay.
You either have to cut Del Mar, eliminate Del Mar Heights Road, or you have to raise it up about 50 feet in the air.
John, why don't we just leave the tracks where they are? We don't have to worry about anything. If we leave a single track where it is and do the no-build option, which says that, yes, we'll tackle the issue.
That is
No, let him finish. Let him finish.
The whole point is we start on an assumption. It's a fundamental assumption. It's a belief that the people want to get the trains off the tracks. I'm not sure who these people are. Secondly, that if we don't get them off the tracks, we're going to ruin the bluff, in spite of the fact that 700 feet, a tiny fraction of the whole 1.6-mile tunnel, is the only part that the city council says needs to be shored up, at least at this point.
It's just basically we said at this point. We know that eventually 2,400 feet of the
2,400 of how much? Out of 88? So we're talking about what? A quarter of it, a third of it, 2/3 of it?
Well, it's more than that, because it's less than 1.6 miles. But the other thing, the important, there's two other things that can happen. One is the freight, and this is an interesting concept right now, is to move the freight to the East County area. Move it so that it will go up eventually I-15 and get to the major freight yard, which is in Ontario and San Bernardino. This has actually finally been addressed by Sandag, and they're actually thinking about doing this at this point. If that happens, then basically the heavy rail along the coast does not need to exist, and therefore you can move and you can build something on I-5 where you don't have to tunnel. It can go up larger grades. It can go, you don't have to have this 2 or 3% grade for freight. And if that happens, and this would be incredible for Del Mar, it would be incredible for the region because of getting the freight out of the urban area and into areas that are less populated, but also getting it to the place where it needs to go, which is Ontario.
Well, is this NIMBYism? But for a second, let's just talk about something in terms of the tunnel versus I-5. Are there any other facts? Is there any other place where we could put the railway line? What are the facts?
Well, there was a proposal to, I forget, can you remember?
Yeah, there was a proposal to go through San Diego Lagoon.
Yes.
And then go out to the freeway and then put it on a tunnel under the freeway so that you wouldn't have to go up the grade, and it would come back out at Carmel Valley Road, Sorrento Valley, and then continue on down basically the old Sorrento Valley Road, hook up with a...
and is that a viable...
Well, the problem...
Well, it's viable in terms of technology. Whether it's cost viable, I don't know. But you know, there's a much bigger issue here that we're really missing. Again, it's even worse than that. You know, we start with the assumption that we've got to remove the tracks from the bluff, and that sort of dictates a whole bunch of things. But actually, from the point of view of Lausanne, it starts somewhere else. It starts from the point of view of requiring a double tracking. But I don't think that's really been examined, and it's not clear to me or anyone else who's thought about it as to what problem we're really trying to solve. I mean, I can mention 3 problems, and they're different. We can mention a problem of commutes. We can mention a problem of intercity travel. We can mention a problem of freight.
So you're not convinced that we need to double track?
I'm not convinced of it at all. And I'm not convinced it makes any sense at all.
And you agree?
I'm not convinced at all.
But this is
your
committee.
But the bottom line is, we've asked the committee not to do that, not to look at that, but to look at how do we remove the tracks from the bluff, which is very important. Again, people look at Del Mar and they think of Crest Canyon, they think of Santa Gita Lagoon.
You said that. Your point is clear. Your point is that you don't want to have anything on the bluff because you want the trains off the bluff. That's your position.
We don't check our common sense at the door when we go into these meetings. All of us are asking, well, is there really a need to double track? What is going on here?
It doesn't have anything to do with double tracking. It has to do with removing it from the bluff. And that's so important. That's, you know, extremely important for many people in Del Mar. And you know, I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, and personally, it's important for people in Del Mar. Have we ever verified that? I mean, have we ever taken a vote where we ask people, would you agree?
I'm talking to people.
Let Lou just finish, though. Go on, because we're going to have to finish in a second. Keep going.
No one's been given the choice of leaving a single track on the bluff or building a tunnel into Del Mar. What they're asked is, would you like to have the tracks off Del Mar? I would. I'd like to have free transportation. I'd like to have an extra car in my garage that you pay for.
I'd like to be a point guard in the NBA.
Me too.
But the bottom line is, I've talked to people. You know, number one. Number two is, we fought when NCTD started. They didn't want anybody on that bluff. And I worked very hard to make sure that we could remain on that bluff.
David, we have run out of time. I am so sorry. It is clearly a hot topic. I want to thank you all for being on our show. David Drucker, Lou Lipton, Jim Ekman, and John Kerridge. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next week. Goodbye.
Additional support provided by Clone Duplicating and Printing in the heart of the village. Copies of this program are available from the Del Mar Library, 1309 Camino Del Mar.